Today I wanted to talk about what I'm going to title as the Pathless Path. And you can think of this as a sort of a kind of metaphor for describing what spirituality is. And this kind of paradox within spiritual seeking in how it can be simultaneously framed as a kind of set of skills, techniques, methodologies that can be cultivated and trained over time. And this implies a kind of a path-like kind of structure. You're moving towards something, ascending certain abilities, cultivating your mind, your attention, your sovereignty, and awareness over your mind. And yet this path is paradoxically pathless, in that ultimately the spiritual path is a return to yourself. You're not going anywhere. You're not escaping. You're not exiting. You're really shedding yourself of the illusions, the delusions of your separation. Because we live and go about our lives with the kind of sense that we're separate to everything. You know, when we identify with our egos, when we identify with this finite and limited body mind, and we mistakenly think that that is our entire exhaustive identity, when in actuality it of course isn't. We are all continuous with the fabric of reality. You cannot separate the internal and the external. We are comprised of the same substance that started with the Big Bang. you know we are the process of nature, and its evolution um, creates ever increasing complexity. And we are, at the moment, us two people listening to this, we are at the frontier of nature's evolutionary process in a certain sense. And at the frontier, we have these miraculously complex human beings, human organisms who are capable of this. Well, where do I even start with that? Humans have created so much good and so much that is bad. you know. But there's also a lot of beauty in the art, in the civilizations that we've created. But there is, of course, that shadow, that destructiveness, the war, the the evil that has been done by people like us. But the thing to understand is that for this lifespan where we are in this sort of operating within this spatial world of sense, we're seemingly trapped and limited by what we can see from our own limited lifespan. That representation that our organism produces in order to survive and reproduce and live and continue, it is but a representation. It's a limited image of what can be seen within this one moment. And we live so faithfully and often completely in this world of the seen. We are sort of totally identified with our egos and with our sort of separation, our separate kind of nature. But when we are overly identified with our ego, we have a tendency to neglect the world of the unseen, um, the forces, the energies that lie beyond the veil of our perception. But of course, for those who have trained themselves extensively in sort of meditative techniques, who have consumed psychedelic compounds, who have engaged in certain, you may call them shamanic techniques to deliberately induce altered states of consciousness, um, you will have sort of direct acquaintance with this sort of world of the unseen, this world that lies beyond our immediate, everyday, conventional perception. And this world is much more expansive than the spatial world that situates you right now. It's a world that's much more flowing, much more energetic, much more dispersed. You could maybe describe it as vibrational. It's it's often been pointed to as a sort of this astral kind of plane where you, rather than being a sort of a physical limited meat body, your movements are more akin to movements of almost light energy, I suppose. And your consciousness is much less tethered to the conventional physical reality of your body and your limbs. It is, significantly more fluid. And I've had a certain taste of this sort of dimension, um, being able to sort of induce this at times through this use of certain techniques. It's not a dimension of experience which I would say I'm an expert in at all. It's really, I've dipped my toes in it and realized the significance of it. And but I'm highly conscious that one should not recklessly um, choose to wander in that sort of dimension, um, unless they're sufficiently prepared, like psychologically within their body. I mean, this is why lots of shamans would typically engage in sort of these rituals of purification or fasting, certain strict diets before they would choose to alter their consciousness, because they understand that in this sort of this liminal astral world where energies and sensitivities are much more amplified, um, the there is certainly a risk of taking on and being poisoned almost by impurities if you go into it with impure intentions and you don't sort of adequately prepare, adequately surrender. And this, of course, ties into the risks of psychedelics, which can be profound agents of healing, but they can also be profound agents of re-traumatization. And I don't say this to discourage or encourage people to use psychedelic compounds, more to just make people aware of, the forces and the energies that they are playing with. Because essentially what a psychedelic will do is it will, as Huxley would say, it would sort of tune down the reducing valve of your consciousness such that you are no longer filtering stuff as much. And that allows in just a rich stream of new, intense, and interesting perceptions and sensations and awesome imaginations. But with that amplification, if you're going into such a trip with a carrying certain traumas, carrying certain negative energies, you will find that such energies are, you know, turning down that reducing valve. It increases the intensity and amplifies everything, both good and bad. So one would have to open themselves to the the risk of their traumatic energies, their more toxic shadow elements being intensified and brought to the foreground of their perception. And that's obviously the risk. But it is also where the functionality of these psychotechnologies for healing, that's where they, become apparent, because they allow you to process repressed contents of your consciousness. But of course, this needs to be done delicately and with care and with training. And this takes time. And like I've said in the past, psychedelics are not the only agent of psychological transformation that is available out there. It's one of the most potent ones, but it's not the only one. And indeed, it's not even, I wouldn't necessarily say it's even necessary if you're interested in astral travel, out of body experiences, that more parapsychological. By parapsychological, it means the um, paranormal psychology, the sort of more investigation into events and circumstances that our conventional scientific paradigm would sort of look at as weird and woo-woo and pseudoscience sometimes. But that's only because our current sort of hyper-materialistic paradigm is, it's in an adolescent or maybe even pre-adolescent stage of consciousness, awareness of consciousness. And that's a whole different thing, which I probably will talk about, the field of parapsychology, because it is, of course, a very rich field, with, which may come as a surprise to some, very rigorous empirical methods of investigation. It's definitely not woo-woo at all. The reality is much stranger than we can ever suppose. That's something that Terence McKenna once said, and it certainly rings true as you begin to learn and try to understand more about the world. It's almost as though the more light that you shine within your mind, it just casts a even deeper and richer and awe-inspiring shadow of the mystery. And that prompts a question of, how do we sit with the mystery that is ourselves? How do we embark on this quest to know, whilst also knowing that it is an endless journey of discovery? I guess it maybe just sort of leads to the point that all the words, all the concepts, all the theories that we can wrap around reality, they can only ever be mere pointers to us, to something that transcends the thing that is pointing. It's like in the Tao Te Ching, the Tao that is named is not the eternal Tao. And the Tao is, maybe you could call it the inherent flow and movement of life and being. But of course, all those words are just mere pointers. You go beyond the pointer and you really sit in silence, and then you are it. And then that raw, I am what I am, sort of reverberates and consumes you. And that's why, the spiritual path is a pathless one. Because ultimately, the spiritual terminology, all these concepts, they're just words, they're images, they're things they're concepts that invite you to go beyond the concepts and go into the non-conceptual, the silent, the intuitive, the raw sense data, that more childish state of mind. In Zen it's called beginner's mind, where you approach life as it is, just right now, with no predilections about past or present or future, about this sort of world of what you want to do. You are just doing. It's the effortless action. And that is the flow. It's you don't need to do anything to get it, because you are it. And when you're in this frame of getting things, you are operating within the frame of separation, within the frame of pretending to be a separate ego. But yeah, like I hope that wasn't too tangential and weird. I don't know, like a lot of these, I get into a kind of flow with it, and the ideas just whip out. I guess. I guess that's what the process of emptying yourself and trying to become a muse is like. You don't necessarily know what's going to come next, but you're just trying to empty yourself of identification, empty yourself of concepts, and simply allowing whatever comes to come. And you kind of hope that it is the right thing within that moment. But yeah, we're all sharing in this journey. It is a often chaotic, but still beautiful journey, I think. Even with all the things that we fear, all the things that we're afraid of, there will always be that light at the end of the tunnel. Good will always triumph evil. And we can all choose to live in alignment with truth as we know it, as we feel it. And you always know truth when you see it. But yeah, just listening to the breeze of the wind. Nice sound. Anyways, enjoy the rest of your day. Um, I don't know how else to sign off these things. I always go for the stock phrase of enjoy the rest of your day, but it might not be day for you. It might be nighttime. You might be, well, if it is nighttime, if it is 2, 3 a.m., then go to bed, sleep. Anyways.